The following is a GoPowercat.com production.
It is 58 degrees in Stillwater, Oklahoma, 47 in Manhattan, Kansas, and here in Studio 73 in Frisco, Texas, 63 degrees and sunny. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders presented by Synergy Financial Partners. This is Brien Hanley. Today we got Ryan Gilbert with GoPowercat, McClain, Baxley from GoPokes. How's it going, fellas?
Doing good. Coming off of a big win last night, so I'm sure we'll have something to talk about, right?
A little bit. How are you doing, McClain?
Doing good. Oklahoma State also currently has a one-game win streak. We'll see if that's extended tonight in Houston. But I mean, vibes are all right here with McClain.
Absolutely. So just taking a look, let's just dive right into this, man. So it is tough sledding to win in the Big 12 on the road, as we saw last night. I mean, Kansas playing well, just in mid-season form. Coming off a big win at home over Houston, really, really good Houston team, goes to K-State, and they don't play – I don't think they played well. I don't think they played awful, but it didn't look like they played well. I thought Kansas State did enough to win. Look, first thing is, if you're trying to beat Kansas State, just don't go to overtime. That would be the first thing. If you go to overtime, you're going to lose the basketball game. That's just end of story. But second off, I just don't think Kansas played that well. I know K-State fans may hate for me to say that, but it's the truth. I don't think they were on top of their game. But I'll say K-State, I don't know that they were on top of their game either. They tried to give the game away. So I'll start with you, Ryan. Tell me what your just quick thoughts about the game last night.
Well, I agree with you. And naturally, I don't think a team is going to play at its best after perhaps its biggest win of the season, right? KU beat Houston on Saturday and throttled them, to be quite honest with you. And so it's not unreasonable to expect a team to maybe take a step backwards. And that's just kind of like human, psychology that kicks in there. You maybe get a little complacent after a win like that. And so, yeah, I mean, KU didn't play its A game. There's no denying that. And I don't want to take away from what K-State was able to do, because that was a quite the effort from Kansas State, especially when you add in the fact that they were down by 11.
Yep.
Just a few moments after halftime, KU went on a 9-0 run to open up the second half, and that team could have easily folded and said, "All right, we're going to be on a 5-game losing streak now in the Big 12." But credit the Wildcats for being resilient and bouncing back in that game. So yeah, I don't think KU played its best game. Johnny Furphy had 4 points, but I do want to credit K-State's defense. But when you kind of go back and look, Furphy just missed some open shots. Players are going to have those, especially playing on the road. I'm sure the environment played, something to do with that. A kid from Australia coming over here, having Allen Fieldhouse behind him every night. Okay, this is awesome. You go to Bramlage Coliseum, it's a different story. So, Kansas could have played a lot better, but I think it was almost to be expected after such a big win over Houston on Saturday. And K-State, this was a perfect opportunity to bounce right back. Both teams played on Saturday. One of the worst losses of the season for K-State against Oklahoma State. I'm sure we could break that one down, McClain. But, just 48 hours later, K-State had something to prove, whereas KU was kind of like, okay, what, we just beat Houston, who's maybe the best team in the conference, best defensive team in the country. We've outlined that here on GoPowercat. How do you lock in after that? K-State was ready for this one, and not that KU wasn't, but KU didn't play its best game.
No, not by any means. I just thought that, look, and a lot of that we could just say K-State forced them into not playing well. I'm a type of the person that likes to give other people credit. But taking a step back from the game last night, McClain, going back to Saturday, I mean, there were some really good basketball games. We'll start off with the K-State, Oklahoma State game. Now, obviously for K-State fans, that wasn't great, but at the same time, I mean, it was good basketball all the way around in the conference. But kind of give me your thoughts on that. I know you mentioned they're on a 1-game winning streak. Kind of give us your thoughts. We haven't had you on before on what the Oklahoma State program looks like right now.
Yes, I mean, like I said, Saturday was a big win, one of their 2 Big 12 wins this season, and that was one of their best games. Very complete game. A game where the first game without Bryce Thompson, a 4-year starter. He's out for the season likely with a shoulder injury, and so this is their first game. How would they respond without a starter or without a guy that's kind of their captain? And they responded well. Keon Williams, a sophomore, had his career game. Just shooting lights out and just playing with high energy all game. Just a really ensemble-led performance on Saturday against a pretty good Kansas State team that was coming in, losing a lot of games, but it was still a team that was in the final, was in the Elite Eight last year. So the big momentum win for Oklahoma State. That's seeing their win, their hard work come off in wins. This is 2 wins in their last 3 games. Winning last Saturday against West Virginia, and so it's a very young team. It's the youngest team in the Big 12. One of the younger teams among Power 6 teams. A lot of freshmen. They start 2 freshmen, play 3 or 4 pretty regularly, and so they're kind of being able to see what Big 12 competition looks like. They're playing Kansases, they're playing Kansas State, they're playing these really good teams, Baylor, and holding their own, and they're seeing the results of that hard work and attention pay off. With a couple of wins in the past few weeks.
And Mike Boynton, real quick, Big B. Mike Boynton, I was saying this before the game. He's too good of a coach to just lose control of his team, right? He's going to have those guys bought in. So I said that even before this K-State game that, K-State's on a losing streak. The stars are sort of aligning for the Wildcats to snap out of this funk, but it wasn't going to be easy in Stillwater. And obviously it wasn't, because Mike Boynton, despite that, what were they, 1-7 entering that game, right? But despite that record, Mike Boynton still had his guys ready to go.
Yeah, from the jump, Boynton's been, they've lost. Obviously, the 2 Kansas games are outliers because they're just one-side affairs that were blowouts from the first whistle. But, most of the other games have been close in the first half, especially, and he's shown his guys that they can compete at this level, that they can, what to expect, and he's seen growth from that first, the first game in Big 12 play. They took Baylor to overtime and lost by 5 here in Stillwater, but since then he's seen his team grow a lot, and it's like you said, it's proving being able to rattle off a couple wins. Though they're still 2-7, still bottom of the pack, it still just shows that anybody can win in this conference any given night.
Absolutely. Conference is just way too tough for anybody to take a night off. Doesn't matter if it's Oklahoma State, West Virginia. Again, another perceived team to be near the bottom of the conference. UCF, they did it again. At home, they beat Oklahoma, another ranked team. UCF, you look at their record, it's 13-8, 4-5 in the Big 12. A couple more wins here, guys, and UCF we're going to have to start talking about them being one of the teams that are going to the tournament. They keep going. If they can get to 8-10, maybe 9, definitely if they get to 9-9, but if they get to 8-10 with some of the wins that they have on their record, guys, McClain, I think they're a team that we have to talk about being in the tournament, don't we?
Absolutely. They're up there. I think you look at the standings, you look at the Big 12 as a whole. There's only a couple teams that you can say there's no chance they make the tournament. I think there's a chance that this back half of the schedule that a lot of these teams could put together some wins. Some of these teams already have wins, but UCF a perfect example of being able to win against Oklahoma. They've got a couple other wins. Kansas from a few weeks ago. These wins that are kind of stacking up, and like you said, they can get to 500, or they can get to 8-10, and then win a couple of games in the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. Why not be a bubble team? Why not be one of those first teams in, or be a tournament team come March and April? So this UCF has been very impressive this season, their first year at this level.
Yeah,
if you get to 9 wins, like you mentioned, Big B, or 8, 9, 10, whatever, Jerome Tang's been outspoken all season long about getting to 9 wins. That's where he wants this team to be. If K-State can get to 9, he believes that any Big 12 team is good enough and deserving enough, for that matter, to get into the NCAA tournament. And so he said that last night after beating KU. They pick up their 5th conference win. Okay, 4 more to go, get to 9 and get in. Any team in the Big 12 that does that is deserving. So we'll see if there's 12 teams with 9 wins. I don't think you can get like 12 teams in, but still, I think that UCF, you can't write off most teams in this conference quite yet.
No, absolutely not. Here's one team that I know that a lot of people were trying to write off maybe 3 weeks ago as Texas. People were writing Texas completely off, and here
Myself
they come.
Included.
They go to TCU. TCU had built that game up to basically be their national championship. They're handing out 500 horns down T-shirts. They bringing all these alumni back. They're retiring a guy's number, and Texas goes in there and whips them. The game wasn't really that close the entire game. They're a team, and again, we talked about it several times, is that Texas, Ryan, has some of the best talent in the country. It's just a matter of whether they could put it all together. It kind of seems like over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, that they have figured some stuff out, and they're playing good basketball again.
Yeah, I always call it the Shaka Smart paradox, right? Like there was always so much talent for him in Austin. You look at the NBA and like the bigs, especially that played under him at Texas, never really was able to get it to come together, right? And so now obviously that's sort of happening for Rodney Terry. And I know that there was a lot of stuff. Big B, we discussed the horns down stuff. So there was perhaps maybe some off the court distractions. I don't want to call them distractions, but things that aren't basketball really related
Sure.
with Texas. And so maybe they've moved past that. I know that the NIL scene in Austin's probably much more prominent than at schools like Oklahoma State or Kansas State. And so, maybe those could have been distractions at some point, but now it seems like, and this is just speculation, though, it seems like they've really started to lock in and click as a team, as a unit, as a whole.
And they're going to need it. I mean, the back half of their Big 12 schedule is, probably the toughest games, at Houston, at Kansas, at Texas Tech, at Baylor. I mean, to get to this point where they're able to go into TCU and win pretty convincingly and put some of these wins on the road and against, better opponents together is a good sign for Rodney Terry's squad that's going to have a pretty, strenuous, last couple of weeks here as we go down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, before we take our first break here, I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Look, we all complain about officiating when it doesn't go our way. I think the best game maybe in the country of the weekend, Baylor and Iowa State, got ruined with some horrific officiating that was going on there. I don't know what else to say. At some point, it just has to change, McClain. I just don't know what else we can do. I mean, again, we all complain about officials. When calls don't go our way, for who we're rooting for, we all complain. That's just par for the course. But when you're kicking a coach out for stepping out of the box, I mean, give him warnings, push him back. Unless he's in your face or on the court, what are we doing? It's just I just don't understand what is going through either the head of officials or officials at court at arenas. I just don't get what's going on.
It's ridiculous. We watching Oklahoma State, Kansas State on Saturday. A fellow guy on the beat was talking. He's like, there's because Kansas State was getting a lot of fouls, and towards the second half, he's like, these are all going to go Oklahoma State's way to kind of balance it out because they just don't really know what they're doing out there, and
Correct.
It's been a running bit all season. It feels like. I mean, and kudos to Baylor for kind of standing out and saying, giving an opinion kind of on behalf of the rest of the conference, on the rest of the coaches in the Big 12, and obviously had to take that fine for it, but I think it was something that needed to be said and something that whether it's the back half of this season or something to look at the off season, but something's got to change and be more even, be more just cognizant of what they're calling and why they're calling different plays and calling different making different calls and fouls.
I know Bramlage, there were so many boos and that's natural. For a home court, for a home environment to be upset with officials in a rivalry game. So I'm sure there were calls that went against Kansas State, but like last night, like David Gasson just completely, I don't know if ESPN was able to show like a replay of this or not, but they did. Okay. Yeah. When DeJuan Harris, or excuse me, it was DeJuan Harris who, I mean, I guess from the officials' point of view, caused the steal, but that Gasson just lost the ball. And, so it goes both ways. And I think that, maybe you look at Scott Drew getting ejected, right? Like the nicest coach in the world, like that's just not characteristic of him to do that, right? So I'm sure you can, point fingers one way or another, but I think top to bottom, you look at it globally, it has been poor both ways in a lot of games this season. Like the Iowa State game for K-State a few weeks ago went on till I think past 10:30, 2.5 plus hours after tip-off, right? Like, and it was because of all of the whistles. And so it's frustrating, and you want consistency. If you're consistently bad, whatever, you'll take it, I guess, right? But
Right.
it's just, it does feel like we're having this, discussion more and more and more in college basketball. And so, Jerome Tang did, I don't know if this was calculated or not, but he went after the officials after that loss against Houston, right? And that's not, he wasn't necessarily blaming the officials for the loss. He was just upset that he felt that one of the officials belittled Cam Carter and said, "You will be on the bench if you keep talking back to me." And then he proceeded to give Cam Carter 2 quick, tic-tac fouls. And so, Jerome Tang obviously apologized for that, and fines may have been in there, or who knows. But it's just, you don't want to see it taking over games the way that it has. And I think KU fans, I think that it's getting bad when even KU fans are starting to get a little upset with the officiating, right?
Yeah.
But all jokes aside, it has been poor. It has been poor.
Especially in the conference that, like we've talked about, that it's so deep, it's so talented. They could have 9, 10 teams in the tournament. It's the best conference in college basketball to be kind of plagued and kind of run down and drawn out. And rather than talking about the talent, we're talking about the back and forth overtime game. We're talking about the officiating or lack thereof, and just kind of the lopsided of it. And so it's really draining for the sport, and a bad look for a conference that's trying to be one of the best in the country.
Well, it's such a physical conference, too. It's such a physical conference that sometimes you just have to adapt to the way that the officials are calling a game, despite how tough you're guarding. And, if it's a physical game, if the officials are calling it one way, that's going to favor to a team that maybe isn't as physical as the other team.
Well, it's a good point. It's because there's some team like Houston. I mean, you could call foul in Houston every play. They're just getting after you, playing physical. But I think the conference as a whole kind of adapts and have taken a page out of that. And it's like, look, we're going to guard you. We're going to get after you. And for the most part, refs, it's not the foul calls that the refs are actually making that people get upset about. Sure, there's going to be times where people are mad, but it's the inconsistencies. That's where everybody loses their mind. And that's where coaches just absolutely lose their mind. It's like the inconsistency. A guy could literally get his arms chopped off on one end, nothing. You go to the other end of the court and somebody breathes on somebody and you're calling a foul. That's where I just think it's so egregious on what's going on. I'm like, just make it consistent. If you're calling a tight game, call the entire game tight. Let the players adjust. If you're letting people play, call the entire game that way and let people adjust. Don't mix and match, because, again, it makes for choppy basketball. They don't understand what's going on. You let this go earlier. You may have let it go 5 minutes before, and then now all of a sudden you're calling it, and I'm doing the exact same thing. Players can't get into a flow, and both of you are right. It just chops up everything that we see out there, and it makes it bad. Bad look. So let's move on. Let's just take a look today. We got some games coming up today. We got Houston, Oklahoma State going to Houston, Iowa State going to Texas. I think that's going to be a really good basketball game. BYU at Oklahoma, Texas Tech going to Baylor. I mean, where does it end, guys? I mean, every single night, it's just great basketball, not good basketball, great basketball that we see, man. This conference is just, it's absolutely unbelievable.
I know, like, Fitz has kind of, K-State played at Iowa State, I think was the first game of this tough stretch for Kansas State, like a 7-game long stretch. And it's brutal. Like, don't get me wrong. And I know Fitz has been outspoken, so I'm going to go after my boss a little bit, but it's funny. Like, he's been outspoken about this stretch, but it's funny. Like, this is the Big 12, right? Like, you're going to have, I think, Cincinnati and West Virginia back to back. Okay. Like, that's very winnable. You can set a realistic expectation to go 2-0 in that stretch. But other than that, like, that's just the Big 12 for you. Like, you every team has a, 10, 11, 12 game stretch. I feel like that's just brutal, but that's how every team is going. And so it's almost a level playing field at that point. Right. So, I mean, it's just tough. I mean, all the games on ESPN Plus, like, I get frustrated about that, but I take a step back and I'm like, okay, there's only a finite number of games. that can really be on ESPN. And, there's so many good games in this league. And so I know it's a cliche. I know everybody hears it all the time, but it's just such a good conference. And it's just so deep. And I think that, coming into the year, UCF and BYU and Cincy, I'm like, okay, the top, like bringing in Houston, that's great. Adding them with KU and Baylor at the top, that's awesome. But these newcomers, maybe it's going to take them a little while to grow and acclimate in the Big 12. No, these guys haven't missed a beat, and they've been very competitive. I remember UCF came here to Manhattan, first game of their Big 12 journey. They got blown out, 25-point loss to K-State. What have they done? I mean, we just outlined it, right, guys? They're on the come up, and could they be flirting with an NCAA tournament? So that just goes to show you just how deep the depth of this league is, as good as it's ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks ago, K-State, when you're looking at that gauntlet, when you're looking at that stretch, they kind of probably circle, okay, Oklahoma State's a game where we can breathe. This team only won one conference game. They've lost 7 in a row, and then they lose. In a game that it was back and forth and ugly in the first half, especially. But like you said, no games off, and that's something that Mike Boynton has preached to this team and to his the players are understanding that there's, whether it's you're playing number 5 team in Houston or you're playing a fellow towards the bottom in West Virginia or UCF. I mean, every game is serious, and every game has that kind of big game championship vibe that we as sports fans appreciate.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing about the conference though is that we're looking at K-State and they've lost 4 in a row. Then they beat Kansas. Then they go to BYU. They win that game. You look at this gauntlet. It's like you have an opportunity. I mean, it coming into the night or last night, K-State was on the outside looking in when you're talking about the tournament. These next 4 games, you go 3-1. They're talking about maybe they're an 8 or 9 seed. It's just because of the teams that they would have beaten. It's just absolutely incredible how difficult this conference is. But we say it's difficult, and it is, but it's fun for fans. It's absolutely fun.
Yeah, and McClain, you said that Boynton treats it like, what'd you say every game is you got to lock in for every game? I forget what you said, but Jerome Tang's message is every game is its 1-game season. And so I think every coach has their little whole analogy or phrase to use there, but it's just every game is tough. Every game you have to focus on. And I think with that Oklahoma State loss for Kansas State, I don't want to say that K-State was maybe looking ahead to KU 48 hours later, but guys, let's be real. That's the biggest game of the year for K-State playing at home. Again, I don't want to say K-State was looking ahead because they treat every game like it's its own 1-game season. But it does go to show you that during that tough stretch that K-State had, the one sort of gimme game was against Oklahoma State. We all know how that one worked out.
Yeah, I mean, Boynton, after the win against West Virginia, he was asked by a reporter saying, hey, how are you going to celebrate this win, first win in about a month? And he said, I can't celebrate. We have Kansas on Tuesday. And then the same thing this past week, beating K-State on Saturday, they're at Houston tonight. And so there's just no room to celebrate. There's no room to appreciate. There's no room to dwell also because, you have an opportunity to get another big win, 3-4 days down the road if you do lose. So it's been fun to watch. This is my first year really paying attention to the Big 12, full time. And it's been a joy to look at each game and look at, 8 or 9 teams that are ranked right now and just how fun it's been.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to park a quick break here, and on the other side, we will get after what this SEC Big 10 merger, what that's going to look like for college athletics after we hear a word from our sponsor here.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, guys. Again, thanks everybody for joining in, watching the Big 12 Insiders. We appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, thumbs up, all that good stuff. Absolutely helps the channel tremendously. And we love bringing all this information to you guys. We love doing this on a daily basis, or Tuesday through Friday anyway. So we appreciate it. Thank you guys.
What about the Monday Insiders? Give them a little credit.
Monday Insiders, exactly. That's a K-State Insider show. So we appreciate that as well. Show up every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. GoPowercat and watch K-State insiders, Big 12 insiders. Let's watch it all. So we appreciate you guys. But so I'll start with you, McClain. This whole Big 10 SEC merger. Now, obviously, it's more about football than anything else. I mean, we can't kid ourselves and think that it's not. For some reason, and I talked to Fitz about this a little bit yesterday, I just think that the SEC and the Big 10 are on a collision course to kick out all other schools that aren't the big revenue producing schools, which, again, even in their own conference, they're going to kick some of those teams out, and they just want to make this one top tier. And of course, the NCAA president is basically bandwagon onto that and given the okay to do that, which I think is absolutely insane, because what he doesn't know is they'll kick the NCAA out and do it on their own. So I hope he's smart enough to understand what's going on behind the scenes there. But I just think that is what the collision course might be, is that they are trying to form an alliance to get enough teams and then even snatch teams from the ACC, the Big 12, and figure out a way to make it just, okay, this is the top tier. Everybody else has to fend for themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, on July 1st, there'll be 4 power conferences with the Pac-12 dying, after, it's a historic season, with, Washington, Oregon, and, the tremendous basketball presence, with UCLA and Stanford over the years. And it'll be just 4 conferences. And I agree with you were saying that, they're trying to whittle it out and kind of make 2 big super conferences or 1 big conference with, nationwide. And like you said, even if that comes to sacrificing their own teams. I mean, I think right now, if you're the Big 10, you would much rather have USC than a Rutgers or Northwestern, unless it comes to, women's lacrosse or something, where Northwestern's a powerhouse. I mean, these big brands that hold nationwide significance, even worldwide significance, that branding is something that's so important, both monetarily and, competitively. And it all goes back to football, like you said. And so I think that's probably an outcome in 4 or 5 years. I've said this, I get questions about, is Oklahoma State, going to be left out of this, when this alliance comes. And I think we're going to get to the point where, it becomes similar to the NFL, where there's, 3 or 4 regions nationwide, and it's more so the big, 20, 30 schools that are kind of in that realm of competing for national championships, competing for the big prizes. And then the other, 120 or so schools are kind of on that second tier.
Yeah, I believe the exact same thing. I just think that it's headed that direction. Now, will it get that far? I don't know. I don't know, Ryan, if it'll get that far. The trajectory says yes. And of course, we had another ruling yesterday that came down, and we'll get more into that tomorrow, but a ruling that, Dartmouth basketball, it can now unionize and they're going to be considered employees. I mean, I used to be a guy, and I'm still a guy, Ryan, that says NIL and the transfer portal didn't ruin college athletics. I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong, and that this stuff is starting to dabble into that and change things. Now, these things are at a totally different level. And we can have that conversation on another day, which we probably will maybe start on Thursday having that conversation. But having said that, it's just, it seems that common sense is starting to get left out a lot of this, Ryan. Common sense has just gone by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things can be true, like the NIL and all that stuff can stink, but also you have to adapt to it as a coach, right? So maybe it is like bad for the sport and all that stuff. So maybe you're coming around to that a little bit. Maybe I am as well, Big B, but it just, excuse me, guys. I been a little sick this weekend, and so my congestion's finally catching up to me. But
you're all right.
My stance has always been the grass isn't always greener, just with realignment in general, right? Like I think Texas and OU in for a rude awakening. Like look at Nebraska. Do you really think that was the best move for your program to go to the Big Ten? I could go on and on and on. The grass isn't going to be greener with this super league or super power, whatever you call it, right? And I think the biggest reason for that is that there's only a finite number of teams in this league, or whatever you want to call it, 2 leagues. There's only so many wins to go around. Every game that gets played, there's 1 winner and there's 1 loser. That's why having Vanderbilt in the SEC is so great. Having Rutgers, like all these poor teams, that's why you have so many winning teams, right? Those top teams are winning all those games, right? If they're all going up against each other, sure, you might have your powerhouses in there. You probably are going to. You will have those teams emerge. But at the same time, you're going to have those teams that are down there at the bottom that are simply not used to being those bottom teams. And so those bottom teams in those leagues may very well be better than Kansas State, Oklahoma State. But the records, K-State, Oklahoma State, and whatever they're playing in are going to go 9-3, 10-2, while that exact, maybe an even better talented team in that super league is going to go, 4-8 or something like that. So it's just the grass isn't always greener. Can't preach that enough, whether that's with this super league or with that's, NIL, whether that's the transfer portal, whether that's realignment. It's not as it's you can't just wave a magic wand. There's no fairy dust. You can say, oh, over here it's going to be better. That's more often than not is not the case.
Correct.
I think NIL and transfer portal have introduced parity to college sports, especially college football. If we're talking, mainly college football, I mean,
1,000%.
You look at the Big 12. I mean, the past 4 years have had different Big 12 champion. You've had different teams competing for the champion. Whereas you look at the, SEC or the Big 10, it's been 2 or 3 teams that, on August 31st and September 1st, there's only two or three teams that can win that conference championship. We know who they are every year, in and out. It's Alabama, Georgia, maybe an LSU if they have a good year. It's Michigan or Ohio State, and then they're going to play a worse, either Wisconsin or Purdue or somebody. But when the season starts, there's already 4 or 5 teams that are going to be able to compete for those 2 awards. Whereas you look at the Big 12, you look at the ACC. ACC, it's a little less parity, but in the Big 12, I mean, there's so much. There's not 3 or 4 teams at the top, and then a lot of bad. There's from top to bottom, there's a lot of comparison, a lot of good players on all those teams that, if given the chance to play a team in the SEC, in the ACC, in the Big 10, they can hold their own because they've been through that gauntlet. They've been through that. They've been playing good teams for, 7 or 8 weeks in a row versus, the SEC where they might play 2 or 3 good teams in a season. And one of those is, non-conference team there in Atlanta or in Dallas to start the season. And right before they play their biggest game of the year, they play a Furman or they play Alabama State or somebody to get a free win. So that's where I think that we're really going to see the benefits of the Big 12 and the ACC, and rest in peace the Pac-12 having more parity and having more competitive teams from top to bottom.
Well, I think that's also where we can hold our hat and stick our chest out, is that we do have the parity. Because in the SEC. Especially in the Big 10 as well, they stick their chest out with, just like you said, McClain, 2 or 3 teams every year. That's what they do. And everybody else just kind of hangs on to their bandwagon or coattails, and rides along with those top tier teams. People have been saying it for years, myself especially. I've been screaming it from the rooftops. The SEC and Big 10, they're top heavy. I go, you get past the top 2 or 3, and it's mediocre football, basketball, whatever you want to call. That's just kind of what it is. I go, but they hold their chest out, holding on the coattails or riding on the coattails of those teams. In the Big 12, that's not the case. Even with OU and Texas leaving, okay, they can go. That's fine. How we can stand out, and I said it all last week, and I'll continue to say it, is it's parity. All the teams can win. We don't know. I mean, just look at basketball in itself. Now, basketball obviously is different than football. I said, but just look at the basketball conference. It's the best in the country, and there's no doubt about it. Football, if you continue, I just think strength is better in parity. If a Baylor can win, an Oklahoma State, a TCU, a Kansas State, and it just all these different teams can constantly win, and you don't know. To me, it brings more excitement to the game. It's more exciting to see other teams be able to win. Otherwise, or you're an Arkansas fan, knowing you're not winning that conference, but you know what? Hey, we're part of the SEC. To me, that would be a lousy fan experience, knowing that you're never going to win, that you always have to ride the coattails of somebody else. To me, that would be depressing, Ryan, to just constantly have to live in that shadow, knowing it is what it is. What are you going to do?
That's why March Madness is so awesome, right? Like
yes.
you got a chance, right?
You
Even
got
if you're
a chance.
16 seed, you got a chance in the big dance, a slither of hope, so, but college football, and I'm glad they're expanding to 12 teams and all that. But yeah,
Correct.
it's just playing in the SEC. It's like, okay, there's just no in this, up until now where they're changing the format, there was just really no hope. Now in the Big 12, I think you win that league. Texas got in there, right? If you win that league, I know this is past tense with the old format, but if you win that league, you're going to have a chance, right? Now you may not get in, you may not. It's going to suck if you don't, but you win the league, you're going to have a good shot, right? And so it's just not, I guess now it does change a little bit with the new format with 12 teams. Maybe Arkansas, goes 9-3 and they beat Alabama as one of those quality wins and they can sneak in, right? So it does change now. But I couldn't agree more with both of you guys, right? Just the depth, like we talked about with hoops, it's to be said with football as well that, any team can be beaten on any given day.
I mean, the last 2 years I was in Athens covering UGA, and I think out of the entirety of those 2 years, there's probably 4 competitive games, and 2 of them were national championship games, or 2 of them were SEC championship games. One of them was a national championship game, and then one of them was the Tennessee game where they were both top 5, and it ended up being a pretty boring, I think, 20-point win for Georgia. The crowd was left in the second half. I mean, every game for Georgia fans, they go into that stadium knowing they're going to win, probably going to win pretty handily, and their quarterback's not going to play the fourth quarter. And that's just how it is. Whereas you look at the Big 12, I don't think there's really any team in the past 4 or 5 years that's been able to do that. TCU, they were undefeated, until the Big 12 championship went to the national championship game. And almost half their games were, decided in the last 2 or 3 minutes of regulation.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it was they had to earn those wins that ended up getting them to the national championship, where it was a pretty bleak affair if you're a Horned Frogs fan out there in California. But that's what I enjoy. Whether you're a Big 12 fan or you're a fan of a conference or a fan of a team or just a fan of college athletics as a whole, I mean, I want to see good games. We don't talk about the games, 20 years from now that are blowouts. We talk about remember the last play of the game, it was a walk-off, Hail Mary or a field goal. Those are the games we talk about. We don't talk about the 30-point wins that this guy set a record for, most yards in a game or something. I mean, we talk about the close and competitive games that meant something to everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of where the direction of the conference is going to head to. I love the parody. Fitz is on the bandwagon that he believes that the ACC is going to fold this summer. I think he's right. I think it's just a matter of time before those lawyers out there, especially at Florida State, first of all, it's Florida State is out in front of this. But if you don't think that there's 8, 9 other ADs, presidents, and that are working the scenes with them saying, okay, you guys are out in front, we're going to give you all the resources that you need to be able to get out of this deal to help them. I just think this summer, I think it all falls apart. They'll end up getting out. They may or may not have to pay any money. It's definitely not going to be that, what was it, the $120 or $150 million grant of rights to get out. They're not going to have to do that. You know how lawyers get, they'll figure it out, and that's going to fall apart. I think the Big 12 should just be there to pick up the pieces, just like they did with the Pac-12, and just keep it pushing. They didn't expand all the way out east. I thought they could have done that earlier, but if this gives them an opportunity, look, I don't like to see the cannibalism of these conferences. I actually hate it. I hate that the Pac-12 went away. I'll hate it that the ACC is going to go away. But you know what? I'm a fan of Kansas State. As long as my team is still in it and relevant, I'm sorry. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. I mean, because 2 years ago, as a K-State fan, and I know we've said this many times, but it's just the truth. We thought we were out. We thought because they're not going to take Kansas State, and we were going to be on the outside looking in, just like Oregon State is now and Washington State is now. I mean, and those are fine institutions. They play really good football, but nobody outside of those regions are paying attention. So it's sad, but it's a reality, unfortunately. But I think that especially if the Big 12 can get this TV deal, that separate TV deal, I'm just telling you, they can do that. I think they got to do it now, because if the ACC falls apart, some of those schools are going to look at that and say, you know what? That makes more sense to be there, like a North Carolina. Now, granted, they may want to go to the SEC, but we know in North Carolina, it's all about basketball. If you can we can get our own network and be on TV, have our own TV contract for just basketball, they might say, you know what? It makes more sense to go there and to do that than it does to go to the SEC. That's just my opinion. McClain, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would enjoy seeing Kansas UNC basketball game as a conference game, right?
Absolutely.
Or a Duke and Houston. Might as well just make that the Final Four. But no, I mean, growing up in the South, I mean, ACC is definitely something that means something to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I mean, like you said with the Pac-12, it's unfortunate that it's a conference that could be dying. I mean, you look at football and basketball. I mean, tons of championships across. Outside of just North Carolina, but I mean, a lot of conference championships and a lot of national championships in different sports, and to see this kind of dwindled away or carried over into the SEC or into the Big 12 or into the Big 10 or into a new whatever happens in a couple of years. I mean, it'd be unfortunate, but obviously, like you said, that's kind of the trending where it's going.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I'll say is just Brett Yormark, man. This is your time to cement. I don't know, not your legacy, but cement the
his
Big
legacy.
12.
You're right,
Yeah,
Ryan.
okay. But just cement yourself and be assertive, be aggressive, and be on top of things, be on the forefront. Don't be caught looking, like a deer in headlights. Just be ready for whatever comes your way. And I think we can all agree that we've got faith in him to do that. As long as he doesn't move the Big 12 tournament out of Kansas City, I'll be happy with whatever he does.
I mean, he looked at us in the eyes in July at Media Day saying, we're not really doing anything for a conference expansion or conference realignment. And then 2-3 weeks later, they added 4 teams, and you think things can just kind of go haywire and the Pac-12 dies. So he's always working. He's always, looking out for what's best for the Big 12 and the teams that matter in the Big 12 and that have, legacies and histories in this conference and across sports. And so I think, Kansas State, I think Oklahoma State are definitely 2 of those pinnacles of this conference, moving forward. And I think he knows that, going forward.
Yeah, I think he does. I think he's kind of a forward thinker. And I think in this day and age, commissioner of big time Power 5 or any conference for that matter, you got to have somebody that's a forward thinker and understands what's going on, not be afraid to take a risk and say, you know what, this is the best for us. Whether it's the best for anybody else, that's fine. Whatever's good for them, that's different. But for us, this is the avenue that we got to go. And I think Brett Yormark, I think he does a really good job of understanding what's needed for us, and that's all you can ask out of your commissioner is somebody that gets it. Cause we've had some that don't. Clearly we've had some that just do not get it, have no idea what they're doing. And it's sad. Kind of got us in the state of affairs that we were in before. Just wasn't forward thinkers. Yormark is it. I think they'll get that basketball deal done. That makes the conference so much more attractive to other schools that they say, you know what? Yeah, we can go be part of the SEC or the Big 10. But you know what the Big 12 has going on over there, we need to take a really, really strong look, because is it that much worse? Because I don't think that it would be. So it's just something to keep in mind, guys. I appreciate both of you guys coming on today. We're going to take our second break before we end the show, but I appreciate both of you guys coming on, and we'll have you back on in the future. We appreciate it.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
Well, it was a fun conversation today, guys. All this conference realignment, all the conference, the merger of the Big 10 and the SEC, all of that stuff, it can be mind-numbing as a fan. Trust me, I'm a fan. I get it. But the one thing that we all have to keep in mind is if your school is still in it, they're still in it, and they're still playing college athletics. Until they tell us that they're not, you can still be excited. There's nothing that you shouldn't still be excited about. Your team is playing. Whether they're playing well or not is a different conversation, but they're still in it. They're still playing. Things are going to change. I know we don't like change. I'm a person that doesn't deal with change well myself, but you have to embrace it's coming. And the more that we just lean into these things, I think the better off that we will be, because if we keep stuck in our ways with the old way is better, it's not going to be that good of an experience for you, because whether the old way is better or not, it didn't stay that way. It's going to change. We have to change with it, people. So I appreciate everybody tuning in today to the Big 12 Insiders. We will be back again tomorrow. Hopefully do it better. You guys have a good one.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.